Good afternoon. This is the weekly Air Passenger Rights Update. My name is Dr. Gabor Lukács. I'm the president of Air Passenger Rights. Welcome to the show today. Today is May 31st, 2020. I'm going to wait until my team signals that we are ready to go as well on our end. I'm hoping that the audio and video are all good and everything is ready to go. So I'm hearing from Becky that audio is good. And what about the team? I was given audio and video is all good. Thank you. So as always, thank you, Dominic, Christine, Martine, and Terry, our team of volunteers, for making this show possible and for helping us survive another week of very intense postings. Sometimes it feels like we are being flooded with posts. Other times it's more peaceful. It would be an interesting exercise in statistics to see what is the correlation between how nice the weather is and a number of posts. I would like to speak today first about some of the latest news that we have seen. There were some confusing news, to put things politely, about what the government is, quote, signaling and what the government is saying on refunds. We have known for a long time, that's not news, that the Trudeau government is not favoring the consumers, that they are actually doing everything in their power to allow airlines to avoid their legal obligations to provide refunds. So that's not really news, but it was recently reported on the Canadian press as if it would have been some kind of new revelation that the government is signaling now that it will not force airlines to offer refunds. And I think we also have some news for the government that it's not up to the government to make up the laws. The laws are made by Parliament, and while currently Parliament is not sitting normally, sooner or later this issue will be coming back to Parliament, and they will have to do some kind of accountability before Parliament on what they have done and how they have treated Canadians. More importantly, whether or not the government enforces the law, there are already a number of class actions for the purpose of enforcing the rights of passengers. So if the government is not doing it, they may be facing some significant embarrassment once the court is doing the same for them. And it is again a sign of the government's short-sightedness, the inability to understand the more complicated picture, that by creating fear in consumers with respect to the refunds of their money, they are actually undermining the entire travel industry, because people will not be buying tickets if they have to be afraid that their tickets will not be refunded. In terms of the first point, as I always like to mention, social media activism. I'm seeing a lot of good stuff happening, a lot of good tweets. Keep the tweets coming. Keep up the pressure. The government is under a lot of fire, and when you looked at what happened this week in the House of Commons, when the former Justice Minister, Jody, actually raised this issue with the current government. So when someone who was formerly part of the Liberal Party is beginning to ask those questions, and when we see also the member of parliament from for the bloc again pushing the question, then we see that we are being noticed, and the government cannot ignore what tens of thousands of Canadians consumers are saying. It is not just the plea of a few fringe extremists who believe that airlines should be issuing refunds and that a contract is a contract, a deal is a deal. This is a problem for many tens of thousands of Canadians who are actively pursuing the issue. And in terms of a back of the envelope calculation, we are talking about a problem for probably several millions of passengers, because the two major airlines that for whom we do know the figures, Air Canada and Air Transat, are owing about $3.4 billion to the traveling public. And if the average debt is $1,000 per passenger, bearing in mind that some tickets are cheap, some are more expensive, then we are in the range of over 3 million passengers. Even if the ticket per passenger is, say, $2,000 on average, we will still be talking about 1.7 million passengers affected. So we are not talking about a small number of people, and people are getting angrier and angrier because the government does not enforce the law as written. So again, the takeaway is, if you have not joined our YouTube channel, join our YouTube channel. If you are not following yet our Twitter feed, follow our Twitter feed. Make sure that interesting tweets that speak to you, tweets that you think will speak to your friends, are getting retweeted. So not just favorited, but also retweeted. Same thing on Facebook. Make sure that the information we put out there is shared with as many Canadians as possible. People need to know, need to understand what is happening in this country and how the government is letting down the public. Also, the opposition parties need to continue to hear that this is an issue important for Canadians. Politics, as always, is about votes, is about popularity, is about polls. So they need to understand in their figures, in their emails, in their inboxes, in their telephone calls, that Canadians consider this a very important topic for them. In terms of class actions, there are two updates I'm able to share with you. One is that this past Friday, there was a so-called case conference in the federal court. That's a meeting between the judge and the lawyers for the parties. And of course, the airlines lawyers tried to drag things out as usual. My understanding is that it was not going too well for the airlines. The case management judge was quite keen on moving things forward. He gave the parties an opportunity to make submissions on how the case would proceed, but my understanding is that he signaled that unless there is some kind of earth-shattering new argument that the airlines can bring forward, he would like to proceed swiftly because he understands the urgency of the issues at stake. So that's what I understand from what happened there. We are also going to see some form of direction coming out from the court, and that will, of course, be available in the docket. So my understanding is that the next case conference is sometime in late June, and at that point, more deadlines will be set for the parties to file documents and to hopefully proceed to what you call a certification motion, a motion where actually the court decides whether to certify the class action, and quite possibly also a summary trial summary trial motion. So the class counsel is asking the court to deal with this matter of refunds very quickly, because it's a very simple matter. Passengers paid money, they didn't get their flights, they have to be given refunds. That doesn't require a full big trial. So this class was asked a question about the scope of the federal court class action, and that deals with the 5 major airlines: Air Canada, WestJet, Air Transat, Sunwing Airlines, and Swoop. It does not deal with their associated vacationing companies. For vacation companies, there is another class action in Quebec which encompasses those ones. And that may be slower, apparently, because in Quebec, Air Canada so far has been dragging things out. There was a recent article in the media in French that Air Canada is playing games there, refusing to appoint a counsel on time. So Air Canada is just being Air Canada. That's the bottom line. With respect to Quebec, there is also another class action, bringing the total class actions in Canada relating to those issues to 4, which, as I understand, was filed just last week. That relates to the issue that under Quebec consumer protection law, when a merchant takes money for services to be provided in the future, so for example, for a ticket, you pay in advance, but the services are to be provided only in several months in advance, then under Quebec law, the merchant is supposed to keep the money in a trust fund or hold them in trust in some form. And of course, the airlines and the various tour companies did not do that. So that's another very nice angle that a group of lawyers are pursuing. I find it a very creative idea. I'm not sure how it is going to pan out. It's somewhat novel idea, as I understand from a Quebec law professor who was interviewed. But I think it's a very good creative idea, and I wish them best of luck, because establishing the principle that money that you pay in advance for your travel is held in trust would be a great benefit for everyone across Canada. I'm being told that there may be a bit of a lag between the audio and the video. I'm wondering if that is happening actually. I'm wondering if there's anything we can do to fix it. Just let's see here. On camera 2. I'm wondering, is there still lag, or has it been resolved now? I'm just not sure whether there is or isn't a lag in the audio. Let's see. Martin is saying on his side things are fine. Okay. All good. So in terms of Sunwing, the question keeps coming up again with Sunwing Airlines is being sued in the federal class action. Sunwing Vacations is in the Quebec action where they are being sued, because they are two different entities. Sunwing Vacation is a tour company, and Sunwing Airlines is an airline. In terms of the other topics on our agenda, let's talk again about chargebacks. So I'm going to switch to our document. I need to switch to our document here, document viewer. There we go. So I'm going to switch to our document viewer, and this is the latest, greatest document from Mastercard. We unfortunately got it almost a month late, or 3 weeks late. Obviously, if you in the future see similar documents coming out, please let us know, because that way we can put out the information faster. So the things that you would like to note here is that this is from April 30th. And I have already highlighted, I posted already in our document archive a highlighted version of this document. This is a 13-page, very detailed document. The first point here is the question, what happens with respect to prepaid services like a flight or a hotel reservation, and if the cardholder was notified the merchant will not be able to provide the services and no refund has been processed, does an issuer have a chargeback right? And the answer is a resounding yes. This is, again, something we have discovered before, but it is nice to see it even clearer explained. I think this appeared in previous documents as well. Another point which comes up here is what happens if the merchant wants to change or postpone the delivery of the actual services purchased. And again, then the answer is a resounding yes for whether the cardholder has chargeback rights. Clearly, if you paid for a service in advance and the merchant fails to deliver those services and says, well, actually, we are going to give you that concert, that spa, that sport event next year, you can say, it's very nice of you, but I want it now, and since you cannot give it now, give me back my money. So you do have a dispute right in that situation. Another point which is new is what happens with repatriation flights. So if you receive a flight to your destination, but the return flight was canceled, and the repatriation flight was organized by the government and utilized by the cardholder, does the cardholder have a partial chargeback for the segment not provided by the merchant? And the answer is no. In most cases, the Mastercard considers a repatriation flight the equivalent of the same service paid for as long as this was not billed for separately. This is the key here. So if I'm going to mark it with red, as long as it was not billed for separately. So if they made you pay separately for your repatriation flight, then of course they have to give you a chargeback. But if you got a free repatriation flight, then you don't have to do that. The other point is that in instances where extra services, for example, seat assignments, class upgrades are paid for but not honored on the repatriation flight, then a partial refund addressing these separate services may be considered. Now, Raquel is asking, how do we argue with Mastercard when they say we don't do a chargeback? First of all, you need to always record your calls when you're dealing with those credit cards. You need to ask for a supervisor, and you need to really be very, very assertive. One of the problems that I find Canadians have, and mind you, I grew up part of my life in Israel, so it's a whole different level of pushiness. But in Canada, people are being way too polite, and there's a whole inclination of just taking no, and oh well, I guess my money was taken, that's all good. Well, no, it's not. It is your money, and you need to treat it the same way as if a parking lot owner was telling you that you cannot get your car that you parked in their parking lot. You need to treat it as an obvious fact that you have to get that money back. And ultimately, with respect to any credit card, if they are refusing to comply with the law, claw back the money. You of course keep making purchases. So once your bill reaches the amount of the chargeback, simply say, well, sorry, I will not be paying this bill because the chargeback to the amounts that you're supposed to process as chargeback will cover this, and have a good day. Being very, very firm and being very very assertive about this is going to be the way to go, because after all, you have a very clear policy from Mastercard International which confirms your right to a chargeback. This is not iffy. The law is on your side, the Mastercard International guide is on your side, and if the credit card company wants to sue you in court, let them sue you in court. They don't have the resources, nor they have the money, the energy to sue thousands of consumers. So if you do it as a group, if you collectively refuse to pay illegitimate charges from airlines for services you never received, the credit card companies will be putting pressure on the government because they don't want to hold the bag for the airlines. One more question. BC Mastercard asks for Royal Air Maroc terms and conditions. Do I have to supply them? The answer is no. What you need to show is that you did not get the services that you received. The wording, and that's the next thing we're going to write here, the burden of proof is on the merchant. They cannot impose on you vouchers in lieu of a refund unless they provide terms and conditions that existed at the time the purchase was made. So it is not enough that they now all of a sudden come up with some new policy that say, well, actually now providing vouchers is okay. The merchant is required to produce terms and conditions that existed at the time the transaction was entered into. And this is another nice addition that I would like to scroll down to. It's right at the end of this document. And when you read here in green, they generally consider the terms and conditions agreed at the time of sale. So what they need to do is agreed at the time of sale. Not too visible. So it's not enough for them to just come up with some terms and conditions. They have to show that whatever terms and conditions they are producing, they are allowed to give you vouchers. And most terms and conditions, when you purchase the tickets, did not say anything about vouchers. So they're based on this principle, they have no case. Derek is asking, who is responsible to decide between the merchant and consumer during Mastercard chargeback? I'm concerned my bank is not adequately representing my interest, as they already resisted in submitting my chargeback. Well, Derek, ultimately it has to go to Mastercard International for arbitration. So the Mastercard International has to deal with it, and you do have a right to access those documents. And my attitude would be, with respect to such situation, is if for whatever reason they come back with an obscure result that you have to pay for services you didn't receive, refuse to pay the bill. Don't pay it. The whole system is built for dealing with one consumer who is delinquent. If there are 10,000 or 100,000 people who refuse to pay, and they refuse to pay only the illegitimate charges, and I'm talking about, I'm not suggesting that you refuse to pay anything else but the charge that is illegitimate by the airline, and of course any interest from that, then the credit cards, the bank would have to take each individual consumer to court, and they don't have the resources for that, they don't have the ability for that. At that point, they will start understanding that they have to put pressure on the airlines. Now, Jackie is saying, currently waiting to see if my chargeback is approved or disputed by Air Transat. In the meantime, Visa has debited my Visa the amount, but they have put stipulations on us accessing the money. They are going to charge us a $350 fee to take that money, but also charge interest on the amount too. How do I get the stipulations removed? Well, I think, Jackie, it's more simple than that. They have given you a temporary credit, and I would basically refuse to pay all these charges. These are not legitimate charges, and first take out the money, make sure that $350 is a quite reasonable price to pay to make sure that your money is safe, and simply tell them, Visa, no, I'm not paying it. This is not legitimate. If you don't like it, take us to court. You need to put back the ball in the court of the banks, the credit cards, the airlines. You want a situation where they are running after their money, not you. They are trying to force you to pay while it is clearly a legitimate charge, and I don't think they are going to get too far with it, just in terms of the sheer expense and the fact that they have no case in court. No judge will order a cardholder to pay for something which they didn't receive. Alex is asking a question. If we have a round-trip flight from Canada to the EU region, the outbound flight is not canceled, but return flight is canceled, but we didn't take that flight, nor canceling the itinerary, I assume it doesn't qualify for a chargeback. Alex, it does qualify for a chargeback, because once your return flight has been canceled, under the EU law, you are entitled to a refund of the entire itinerary. So once they cancel the return flight, you cannot be expected to take a flight and be stuck at a destination. And the EU law is quite clear. This would be Article 8, Subarticle 1, subparagraph A of the European regulations, that if any of your flight is canceled, you can cancel everything. It's not like a piecemeal thing. Well, I'm just going to teleport myself from C to D once I've taken part of my flights. Pat Acker is asking, in view of the fact that CTA has stated it will not be talking to the airlines until July in order to give them time to deal with the issues, what action can be enforced on them in this time with their involvement should be foremost on their agenda, or get a mitt and get in the game? Pat, I would say in this situation, I would stay away from the Canadian Transportation Agency. They are institutionally a corrupt body. Corrupt morally, not in the sense that they're taking bribes, I'm not saying that, but as an institution, they are dysfunctional, they are not serving passengers' interests, they are serving only the airline's private interests and assisting airlines to avoid passengers getting what they are owed. So my suggestion is stay away from the agency as much as you can and take airlines, if you absolutely have to small claims courts. If 1,000 passengers took Air Canada to small claims court across the country, they would be in a very tough situation because they can deal with 1 or 2 cases, but when it comes to 1,000 cases, it becomes a resource strain, and if it is 10,000 cases, it becomes completely impossible for them to deal with it. That's also why I think a class action is a preferred method here of dealing with matters. But if you feel that you want to take things to your own hands, go with it. Helen is asking, what about the excuse of force majeure? Force majeure deals with the obligation of the merchant to perform. It deals with the obligation to provide the actual services and with damages for those. So if you look at it from the perspective of how those damages work, the idea is that if you are supposed to have traveled and then you cannot travel because the airline cancels your flight. Say you were to have a wedding in Mexico and they cancel your flight for reasons outside the COVID-19, just because they don't think it's economical to operate a flight. And then you, as a result, have a loss of enjoyment. You don't get married there. Well, that is something that you could sue them for. Force majeure is a doctrine that allows the merchant to say, well, we understand that you incurred loss of enjoyment because of the cancellation, but this was an act of God, force majeure, and therefore we are not liable for your loss of enjoyment. That's where force majeure doctrine ends. It's not a doctrine that would, by any stretch of imagination, justify the merchant just pocketing the money without providing services. I'm seeing here a question by Gina. Will our credit rating be affected if we refuse to pay? Are these steps to make sure it is not affected? You know, if you just refuse to pay without saying anything, without writing anything, of course that's not right and they could do something to your credit rating. But if you continue to dispute it, if you continue to convey that you do not recognize those charges as legitimate, you don't at any point accept the charges, then it is a whole different game. They can try to do something, but then you contact your credit card, your credit rating company and inform them, here's the correspondence, I dispute this amount, I don't accept it, and there's no judgment against me. So at that point, they would have to actually bring a judgment to be able to put something in your credit record. If they otherwise put something there, it will be defamation, and then you could possibly sue them for many thousands of dollars for defamation. So the credit card companies will not likely do that because they see that you're fighting back vigorously. The point is to stay within the parameters of the law, to obviously pay any other amount that is owed except for the illegitimate amount. Becky is asking, are all airlines starting to change their policies on vouchers, getting rid of the 24-month expiry? I don't know, and Becky, to tell you the truth, I don't really care. Vouchers are not cash. You cannot buy groceries with vouchers. You cannot pay your bills with vouchers. You cannot pay your taxes with vouchers. So these are forms of the airline to break the law, and our purpose here is to bring airlines to comply with the law. There is nothing wrong with airlines negotiating a private deal with passengers, for example, telling them to offer them twice the amount, 3 times the amount in vouchers. But as long as it's being imposed, the details are immaterial. What is offensive to the law in the eyes of the law is that it is being imposed. Carmela is asking, if I have refund confirmation emails in hand, including a separate one for fees, telling me 30, 10-day response, 10-day wait respectively, Is it a done deal for me, or can they just be buying time? Carmela, I can actually tell you that after 15 days, I would file a chargeback. Why? Because 15 days is a standard for providing a refund. They can make all sorts of promises, but they have to provide, the airline has to provide you with the standards of refund. That's 15 days for credit cards. So 10 days is certainly reasonable. After 15 days, just file a chargeback. If in the meantime they issue the refund properly, the credit card company will see it and they will match up between the charge and the chargeback, and they will know that the situation has been resolved. But I would not just go by promises. Promises are cheap. Talk is cheap. We are now about 30 minutes into our show, and I'm wondering if there are still any questions, kind of pressing questions that should be answered. I want to talk a little bit about AMEX, American Express. We are seeing systemic problems with AMEX. This week has been quite insane to me, like this past week, with other things, other deadlines that I'm working on. So I was not able to fully pay attention to how to deal with it at a systemic level. But I'm noticing the issue, and we will have to do something with AMEX. One of the possibilities that is being contemplated is if we have enough evidence of a large-scale problem of them just acting in a partial manner, acting in a pro-airline manner, and not protecting the consumers, is issuing a consumer advisory to cancel cards with Amex and refuse to do business with them. It would be an extreme measure, so I'm not rushing to propose that. But on a shorter term measure, I know that in the queue for help with credit card disputes, there are a number of Amex cases. They are typically not coming with deadlines, so that's the reason that they are not being prioritized. I'm now just trying to catch up with people who have deadlines tomorrow and on Wednesday. But I will get to those Amex cases as well. And if Amex is continuing to be so combative, we may have to take some action there as well. But for the short-term solution with Amex is don't pay. Simply don't pay. Those are not legitimate charges, and you need to constantly act in a way that conveys that you don't accept those. Simply don't accept. Keep in mind, this credit card arrangement is really a leap of faith on both ways. They have a leap of faith that you will pay. You have a leap of faith that they are going to reverse charge us when something is legitimate. If they break the trust, you don't have to maintain the trust as long as you act lawfully. You don't have an obligation to pay a charge which is illegitimate. They have a chargeback guide, and if they don't adhere to their own policies, which you expected them to adhere when you entered into a contract with Amex, they shouldn't be expecting you to pay. See here from Renan, just an update. Thank you for help. I'm already back in Canada with my wife. We ended up getting a court injunction in Brazil since Air Canada have an office there and they were obligated to get us back at no charge. Go to court works. Ben and I would love to see a copy of that court injunction. That's newsworthy. If you actually had a court injunction to force Air Canada to transport you, that's amazing. I'm sure some Canadian journalists also will want to hear about it. So after this show, let's talk about this. Mike is saying, Capital One Mastercard were reluctant to file a chargeback and told me if the chargeback falls, I will not be able to reopen it as a decision will be final. That's false, right? It is false. All these Mastercard Visas type of cards have one advantage, which is it is not Capital One which is calling the shots. It's Mastercard or Visa International. They have to abide by Mastercard and Visa International's rules, and those rules, as we have seen on those documents, are quite clear. So I would not be too worried. If necessary, again, I would claw back payment. That would get their attention. But first, try to escalate it through their manager, through their food chain of command. And remember, if the airline comes with some kind of dispute, some kind of rebuttal, make sure that you get your documents. You get the documents they submitted, and then you file rebuttal. And the battle doesn't end. It is not over until you have won, until you have gotten back your money. Bridget is asking, Are we supposed to receive physical credit vouchers? No, those credit vouchers are all kind of logical things that they issue in their own computers, which is one more reason why I so much distrust them, because it's somewhat hard to prove what you had and didn't have and what was the expiry date because you don't have a physical object in hand. But most importantly, with vouchers, you cannot buy groceries, you cannot pay for bills, you cannot pay your taxes. So that's the reason why we don't accept vouchers. I'm wondering, I think I'm now at the end of my question queue here. Audio is freaking. Is there an audio problem, folks? Or is it just something momentary? Let me see. Audio is off. All right. How is the audio now? What's happening with the audio? I'm hearing that there are some audio issues. I'm just not sure yet what to do about it. Okay, I'm going to take a very short break and we'll continue then. Just bear with me for a moment. I'm going to take a short break. All right, how is the audio now? I'm back. I just restarted my streaming software, so I'm wondering how things are working now. Is it good? Is the problem but jarring again? All right. Then, so how is it now? I switched now to a different microphone, and I sound like Darth Vader. I switched now to a different microphone. Is it any better by any chance? Okay, so we are going to continue with this microphone. We'll be looking at what's happening here. As you can see, probably maybe my computer is showing its age, or my laptop. But let's see here. We are going to deal with those problems later. So now, fortunately, I have a backup. Okay. So it seems that we are running a bit, probably reaching the end of my question queue, and especially with the technical problems, I'm not sure. Okay, here are more questions. I pay my credit card off monthly. If the chargeback is disputed and withdrawn, what happens then? I don't think I should acquire sufficient debt on the card to equal to the amount of the fare I paid. Well, Diane, what I would do is, once you have a chargeback going, you get a temporary credit. I would remove that money already from the account with a cash advance form. And the cash advance is always a way to have sufficient debt on the card to be equal to the chargeback's amount. Barry is asking, we have a chargeback with AMEX, which they say we won and was out back to my wife card on May 6th. It calls on May 8th and again May 15th. However, the card was replaced due to fraud and AMEX still hasn't moved the money from the old card to the new card. I think this is an administrative problem, Barry. I would not worry too much about this. AMEX will sort it out. If you want a dispute, don't worry about it. It just may take a bit of time. So I wouldn't worry about it. Next question, team. If we still have one. Today we're trying to keep it to maybe 45 minutes. With such a nice weather, I think everybody wants to be outside and it's perfectly understandable. So if there is any other question for today, then I will answer it. If not, then probably we can wrap things up. Nothing in the queue. All right. Well, folks, I think today it's going to be a short session then. Thank you very much for joining us, and stay safe. Enjoy the good weather, but in moderation. And we are going to, actually there's one more question here. David is commenting, David Fowler, once the chargeback is initiated, the airline can concede, pay back the consumer, and pay a small administrative fee penalty to the credit card company. If the airline disputes the charge and loses, they pay back the consumer and pay a large administrative fee. Given the chance the airline can successfully dispute a chargeback is small. Any thoughts on why they are doing what they are doing? So, David, the reason airlines are disputing the chargeback is because they are hoping that some consumers will just give up. They are hoping that people will just, and not have the courage to fight back, or will just accept the situation. That's the reason. That's the reason also why we need to fight back with all our might. What the airlines are doing is clearly wrong, and we have to fight it until we win. So on that note, I think we are going to end here, and have a wonderful week. Enjoy the good weather in moderation, and we will see how many news we get in the coming week. We may come back next weekend or in 2 weeks. It's still to be decided by our wonderful team, which again, I have to thank them for all this moderation. Dominic, Christine, Marty, and Terry, thank you very much for all you're doing and for helping this group stay afloat in very difficult times. Have a wonderful